Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Kaizen Synergy Legal Practice webinar on the COVIDSafe Plan requirements that agencies need to have in place. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director of Kaizen Synergy. I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. This session has had a significant amount of interest from agencies around the country, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the land on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners from where you join us around the country today. So today's agenda is around the COVIDSafe Plan. With it, we're going to look at why is it important, what is it going to do, what are the roles and responsibilities of yourselves as duties of directors and officers, and I'll cover that fairly briefly, but also looking at the legal compliance framework around it, as well as policy directives, and looking at how this can actually be brought together. There are also operational considerations that we're also going to cover in terms of how do you actually roll this out. So part of this is going to be also a hands-on type of session to show you what other agencies have done as well too. And also look at the 4 areas that we've seen that actually works with agencies as well too. So not just the COVIDSafe Plan and what should be included in it, but what are the supporting activities like policies that you should have, or what are the pandemic forms for monitoring that you should be looking at, and how do you also monitor this as well too. With it, just a few housekeeping items that I will also cover off. This webinar is being recorded right up to the question and answer section. We will actually open up the phone lines and also answer any questions that people might have through the questions panel as well too. You can actually ask questions through your chat panel as well too. This will be published on the Gemba 360 YouTube channel, and I'll show you where that is and come to that in today's session as well too. And all materials, including these PowerPoint slides that I'm using today, will also be circulated around to all attendees. The idea is that we're also having a knowledge base where weekly circulars around COVID-19 legal compliance newsletters will also be sent out to all attendees as well too. If you do have any questions, either today or following today's webinar, if you are watching this on the YouTube channel as a recording, then you can always contact us here or reach out to myself directly on mobile or via email as well too. So with it, just as by way of introduction, Kaizen Synergy was a law firm that I actually set up about 10 years ago. Some of the agencies that we have supported in the past are listed here. As part of that, we've taken a very different approach to some of the traditional type of legal work, and that is actually looking at systems that agencies can actually use to actually deal with and address some of their operational areas. So it's much more than just the, I'll say, the black and white legal areas that law firms have been known for in the past. That said, we have worked across with a number of different agencies over the time. As part of that, we've also received Aboriginal and NAIDOC awards from Aboriginal and Community Elders under NAIDOC awards as well too. And also looking at operational systems that support pandemics. We've worked across the swine flu areas in the years gone by, bushfire recovery, in supporting agencies with systems and forms that actually support their business operations. And I'll show you what those look like today. As I said, there are a number of resources that we are making available to all attendees and registered people that have also registered to join this session today. Part of this has arisen because works that we have done in the past few months with agencies across the board has been around the COVID-19 challenges that agencies have had. And with it, I'm pleased to say that I'll show you 3 of the case studies of agencies that have actually looked at the COVID plans, looked at policies, what policies they need to have in place, updated information on websites as well too, but also looking at how they actually engage staff, volunteers to actually support their services that their agencies run. Because at the end of the day, while we're all dealing with this COVID-19 very real public health challenge, we're also looking to operate and run services as well. And that's what we found with a number of agencies. And this webinar that we are running today has come out of that, where agencies have actually shared information with other networks and agencies in the not-for-profit and community services sector as well too. So part of this that I will actually show you is a dashboard that allows you to actually manage your COVIDSafe plan as well too. And all of you can have access to this as well. So with it, for one of yourselves, we are making this available for agencies as a resource, and I'll come to that. With it, it'll give you some of the baseline compliance tools that you'll need to actually commence if you haven't already, but also manage your COVIDSafe plan as well too as part of this process. So that is something we are actually opening for every single agency that is joining us today, or if you are listening to this in the future, by all means contact us and we can actually open this up for you as well too. And it is a resource that we are making publicly available for a director and officer at a company as well too to actually utilize as well. So let's go through today's agenda and what we're actually covering off. So effectively, we're going to just run through why it is important, what is the COVIDSafe plan going to do, looking at the duties of directors and officers, and also cover off some of the background and context around this for you as well too. So by attending this webinar, I hope you will do get three things. The first thing is get timely collection of resources that provide an overview of information that may be helpful to support your company, your clients, and the clients you provide services to as well too. Also, see what COVID-safe systems and activities other companies have been doing that is working. Now, one of the challenges that we've certainly seen with agencies is that when you're trying to do this, and I've spoken to a lot of agencies over the past week as people have been registering, is that they're unsure of what they actually need to do and what actually works. And as part of that, we've got 3 examples of companies that have dealt with challenges over the past few months, equally those that have continued to operate and also grow their services during this crisis as well too. And as I said, we'll see 3 different case examples of what has worked and what actually continues to work as well too. That said, I would like to acknowledge 3 people around these case examples that we'll talk about. Rumballara Aboriginal Corporation and Laurie Saville, the Chief Operating Officer. Women's Housing, Judy Line as the Chief Executive Officer, and also Wild Projects, Brad Crosby, who's the Project Officer at Wild Projects. So with it, there are 3 very different case examples we'll actually walk you through as well too. Rumballara, just as an overview, provides a range of services. They run multiple sites. We're talking 200 to 300 plus staff, a range of health and well-being services, justice services, outreach services, aged care services. Women's Housing is a different sized agency. We're looking at about 60 staff there, but they provide rooming, house and client advocacy services as well too. Wild Projects is based up in Queensland as well too. They're a smaller company, but provide equally important work where they actually go and visit schools and provide housing, camping and support services to youth. So you can see we've got three very, very different companies and structures around that as well too. I will add that Women's Housing was a service that also had to manage services in Victoria that were covered by the recent hotspot requirements as well too, and the changes in lockdown measures and how they actually rapidly got information out to their clients. We'll walk you through as well too. So why is this so popular as well too? Just about every possible community service organisation are attending today. With it, we've got agencies from health, the education sector, religious groups from all around the country, community legal agencies, Aboriginal services, museum arts, as well as cafes and food banks and a range of other services as well too. What's important here is that there are some agencies that have closed for now but are still attending, some that are waiting until next year to open, and some that are actually continuing to deliver services today as well too, and needing to have in place COVID-safe plans as well. So there are a range of agencies that are joining us. With that, as we move through these slides, and you would have seen Prime Minister Scott Morrison talk about the three-step framework for the COVIDSafe Australia, and effectively it being described as a menu for state premiers to actually roll out as well too. And this is a document that many of you would have already seen. That being said, what is important here is that as we step through each of these areas or steps, effectively you'll see, and I've just highlighted parts of this being that workplaces develop a COVID-safe plan. And it was an indicator that was put in to these steps. But really, so many agencies said to us, what does this actually mean? How and what do we actually need to do? And with it, there is quite simply, as many of you have seen, a myriad of information that is actually out there. And so much information that people are saying, well, what do we actually do and how can we actually meet these requirements in order to look at what we actually need to be doing? Now, the COVIDSafe Plan, when we work with other community service organisations, effectively it's meant to do four things. That is, ensure staff are kept safe, community and services are supported and delivered. It needs to be able to change for your business services as requirements change as well too, and also allow access to support to continue to deliver services. Now, when I say meant and going to do, it depends where you are along this. But effectively, when you look at a lot of the guidelines that are coming out of the Commonwealth or the state governments, these are some of the four things that they focus on. What I also want to add to that is that it should also ensure that your company meets its legal compliance obligations as well too. There are requirements under work health and safety laws, which I'll cover in a minute, but also public health laws as well too. There's questions that people have asked under privacy as well. So if we collect, for example, if we collect client information, do we need to hold on to this and how long for? There's also fair work requirements as well too that's coming out. So there's a lot of other, I'm going to say, points that are hidden that governments tend to not publicize as much as well too. But in saying that, what is concerning is that there's already talk of class actions against aged care services, certainly in Victoria over the last week, for people not having appropriate COVIDSafe plans in place. There's also judicial inquiries into the government management of hotel quarantine programs as well. So with it, for us and when we're working with agencies, there is this real need to have a COVIDSafe plan in place. Obviously, for those 4 dot points I mentioned at the top, is clearly from a public health perspective for you to have it, but also to ensure that your company meets its legal compliance obligations, and also to avoid some of the very real legal actions that are currently, I'm going to say, swirling around and are being reported to at this point in time by the media as well. So really, one of the things that we've said to not-for-profit agencies is that, look, COVID-19 will be with us for some time. So it's important that your business has a plan and continues to plan to keep your workplaces healthy, safe, and virus-free. Now, one of the things that we have done in today's session, and I will acknowledge these as we go through, is that we have looked at the various Commonwealth guidelines. We have looked at the different state guidelines. So whether you're coming to us from WA or Queensland, Victoria, Tassie, New South Wales, across the country, effectively we have brought a lot of the material together. And I will acknowledge that as I go through as well too. So some of this information is actually copied verbatim from other guidelines, and we're quite happy to acknowledge those from different regulators and government departments too. So with it, one of the things that I've mentioned a couple of times already is around duties of directors and officers under work health and safety. So under work health and safety requirements, and also under governance standards as well too, there are duties of directors and officers, and it is something common even before COVID-19 that you all should have been aware of. And effectively, if you are a director or officer, you need to exercise due diligence to ensure that your company complies with their duties and obligations. So in relation to COVID-19, due diligence really means you must acquire and keep your knowledge of COVID-19 situation up to date. It means that as part of this, you should be seeking information from the Australian Government of Department of Health and check daily for updates around safety advice, which is relevant to workplace, and quickly take steps to ensure that your agency implements its workplace risk assessments and audits to ensure that the workplace is safe as reasonably practicable as possible. In saying that, it also means that the workplace is properly resourced to manage work health and safety risks during the COVID-19 outbreak, and check that resources are being used. And we'll come back to how this can actually be managed and how other agencies have achieved this. So with this, one of the governance obligations is this, I'll say, overarching duties of directors and officers. So if you like, this kind of sets the umbrella of which we're then going to look at the COVIDSafe plan and what should actually go into it as well too. So let's actually go through the legal compliance area. So effectively, when we look at what are we actually trying to achieve in the different steps, and let's just step through this first of all. So effectively, if we look at the different steps, effectively, there are a range of reference materials that are being circulated out. And with it, it's easy to start with these, where you may have seen that PMC or Prime Minister and Cabinet have provided some guidelines around what the COVIDSafe plan should look like. There are also clear state examples around this. Some of these come from South Australia. Also, Queensland has put up its own roadmap around easing restrictions. And these reference materials we will also circulate around to all attendees today. Equally, Victoria has also put up its COVID-19 plan for the Victorian community services sector. As part of that, we have loaded these into the dashboard and resources that we'll also send around to you. And you'll be able to effectively look at the step plans, and I'll show you what this looks like as part of the resources that we're actually going to show to you as well too. And this allows you to have the step 1, step 2, and step 3 into a dashboard that allows you to access this in very real time as well. So effectively, the purpose and the role of the COVIDSafe Plan and to meet your legal compliance obligations is that effectively, if a business chooses not to utilize the provisions of the COVIDSafe industry plans, which are available, it must operate under the relevant conditions listed under the roadmap and public health directions. Now, this was taken from one of the Queensland's sites as well, but this is equally replicated in some of the other states and territories too, and it's the same theme that we are actually seeing. This may include limiting the number of customers on site where you may deliver services, completing a mandatory COVIDSafe checklist and training. And if you are hosting what COVIDSafe event, then event organizers should monitor the list of approved COVIDSafe industry plans to determine whether their event is covered by one or more of the COVIDSafe industry plans and guidance on measures to implement this in the particular activities. And organizers are expected to ensure compliance with these approved COVIDSafe industry plans for the relevant components of your event, including any specific requirements regarding approvals. And so one of the things that agencies have said to us is, okay, this is great that the governments have asked us to do this, but how do we actually do this, and what's a checklist that effectively we need to utilize in this as well? And I'll walk you through what that looks like. So effectively what is being looked at is the examples of controls around this. So where agencies and the work that you're looking to do within your COVIDSafe plan, I'm just covering a bit of the theory here. So there is a little bit of, I'm going to say, language definitions that we just need to cover, and then we'll jump into some real, how this works in, I'm going to say, real life. So with it, effectively the examples of controls, and we'll talk about this, is around substitution. So where can we substitute some of our business processes? So for example, substitute handling with cash with providing contactless payment methods. It may be isolation, so enforce social distancing requirements by providing barriers and screens to isolate workers from customers. So that's the idea of isolation. Administrative means administrative controls, meaning provides training and supervision and instruction on how to manage the risks of COVID-19 within your workplace, but also look to negotiate changes to to work to allow social distancing to occur, and also changing rosters to have workers working from home on a bi-weekly roster if possible. Now, one of these things is also around how do you actually monitor what staff are doing, working from home, as well as, you know, screening staff as well too. And I'll show you what other agencies have done around this too. So effectively, when we look at the COVIDSafe plan, there are a number of items to actually include in this. So effectively, as we go through, and we've taken this directly from state government guidelines around this, and we found that these actually work really well. So the first thing is to look at checklists. So include checklists for your company to follow so they easily know how to keep their workers safe and limit the spread of COVID-19. So these checklists should include requirements for keeping workers safe, workers being not only your employed staff, if you have them, but also volunteers as well, but also requirements for social distancing. So in order to identify how they can implement social distancing measures in compliance with public health directions. There's also the need for checklist requirements for keeping workplaces safe, and workplaces being not only if you run office sites, but also if people work from home as well too. And there are expectations that workplaces are kept safe around that, and there are checklists from Safe Work that actually allow you to do that as well. Equally, there are requirements for workers and customers to ensure that they follow health and hygiene rules as well too. And Safe Work, as I mentioned, has published example checklists which you can use to help write your industries or checklists as well too that you might have. And we'll show you what one look like, and I'll actually give you access to these as well for yourselves to use. So with that, Workplace Health and Safety has also published a guide for businesses, which will help explain businesses in your industry as well too. And this is part of the items that are being covered off today. Equally, when it comes to best practice and conducting guidelines, effectively, this section should prescribe specific measures a business should put in place to conduct a best practice COVID-safe business in terms of social distancing, public health record keeping obligations as well too. So that might include client registers as well too, staff registers as well. So effectively screening people that may attend your premises or work as well, or agency, but also practicing good hygiene as well. It should include guidance on how a business should act in situations where a person or worker presents with symptoms of COVID-19. So how are you actually going to deal with someone if they actually present with COVID-19, whether it is a worker or even a client that you're providing services to? The critical message that needs to be emphasized is that workers should be sent home if they display symptoms of COVID-19. And there are some agencies that have actually given staff access to a COVID-19 either daily form if they're working every day, and just ask them to answer a series of questions either before they come in or as the first thing that they do. And I'll show you what one actually looks like. Other agencies have taken a bit more liberal approach where they've actually allowed it to actually be done weekly. And the reasons for that is because the staff that they have or volunteers that they have aren't working every day and they're not coming into contact with some of their services that they deliver. So with it, they have given them a bit more latitude to actually do that. And I'll show you what one of those forms look like and things that you can yourselves can actually use. Equally, setting up rules for conditions of entry. Now, this section should consider ways your business can safely control the flow of customers in and out of the business. Examples of this more recently is that you've seen it with some of the food-based companies like Coles and Woolworths, where they have flow in, flow out. You may also have seen on the news with Bunnings recently as well too. Equally, the ability to right to refuse entry and service to people who show COVID-19 symptoms, and the use of waiting areas if applicable. So other companies have actually already started to do this. So it's nothing new that we're actually showing, but effectively looking at following these guidelines. It should also include guidance on the rights and responsibilities of your business in refusing entry and service, as well as the tools to help your business deal with customer conversations as well. And so with it, they're also looking at customer interaction. This section of the plan should include ways your business in your industry can safely interact with customers. In terms of completing services and payments, this section should consider ways your company can safely complete service, pack orders, and carry out transactions and payments. This may include how staff can accept and provide deliveries safely. And if there are communal services and some communal facilities and spaces, and this may be well in religious programs, as well as either rooming houses as well too, as examples of this, where your company can safely manage communal facilities and shared spaces while meeting hygiene requirements. Your COVIDSafe plan really should explain the steps a business can take to ensure that non-permitted gatherings do not happen near or on the premise itself. And so as part of this, when we're looking at this, we also need to look at managing egress and emergency evacuation proceedings as well too. And in this section, your company should look at ways and needs to manage how emergency evacuation procedures and what restrictions are in place. There's also the need to ensure that your staff are aware of what these are, and this is why we've actually recommended using policies, and we've seen that with a number of agencies where they've actually utilized key policies to inform staff, as well as given them access to training resources as well too, to keep them informed about any changes that are going on. And again, I stress that staff aren't just employed staff. but it may also be volunteers as well too, and also board members. And this also includes, as I mentioned just before, around ensuring that training is provided by your agency as well. Equally, your COVIDSafe plan should also include information on how your state, and this was taken from the Queensland guidelines, complies with the public health directions by the Chief Medical Officer and its own Department of Health as well. And it's equally important, as we've found more recently, that you review your COVIDSafe plan. Once it is done, you may need to update it from time to time based on changes that are occurring. And also, some agencies have equally taken it to include a statement of compliance that they can actually print out, sign and date, and display in their premises to actually say, look, this is what we've actually done in order to support services being delivered to clients. And there may well be other information that you want to make available on your website as well. Now, as I have mentioned, this sounds like there's a lot of information in here. One of the things that we have done as part of the resourcing for agencies is to load some of the key COVIDSafe plan steps into a dashboard for you. This is a resource that is being made available to all attendees and agencies that are listening to this in the future through the recording. And with it, you can quite simply log in to the Gemba dashboard. We will be giving you the login details to this as well too. You can simply jump in. That's just my password that we've for the demo site. And with it, when you click on this icon here, this will bring up your COVIDSafe plan template that you can actually start to utilize. It is open for one person within your agency to actually use. And with it, it gives you the key things just to look at. And I will return back to this, but just to say that you can actually even search this, just go to gemba360.com on Google, and you will see the big blue button and log in from there. Once you do get the login details, you can go to the dashboard. It will be set up specifically for your agency as a service that we are providing. With it, click on the pandemic section and your relevant industry plan will come up for you to see. If we're looking at the COVIDSafe plan section, you can simply click on open and key items within your COVIDSafe plan will then appear automatically for yourselves to actually view and action. With it, you will see on this that we have included two additional items, one being the Job Maker and Job Industrial Relations and Job Maker Skills Program. This was just feeds that we actually placed in here specifically because of an announcement made by the Prime Minister in relation to reviewing industrial relations as part of the COVIDSafe plans initiatives that are currently going on. So with it, let's have a look at the COVIDSafe plan for your agency. So going through it, effectively, step one covers off that it covers non-work gatherings of up to 10 people, up to 5 visitors at home, and there are guidelines that each of the steps follow. So looking at step one, this is what effectively step one is effectively looking to cover. Step two is effectively looking at building on slightly larger gatherings and more businesses reopening. Higher risk activities may have tighter restrictions, but effectively ballooning it to 20 non-work gatherings of up to 20, as well as states and territories may allow larger numbers in some circumstances as well. Step three, when we're looking at step three as part of the COVIDSafe plan, effectively is looking at non-work gatherings of up to 100 people. Larger gatherings may be considered, and also a return to workplace, and workplaces may also need to obviously amend the COVIDSafe plan as part of this as well. As I've mentioned, there are duties of directors, and as part of these steps through, it's important that from a legal compliance point of view, that directors are also kept up to date about what's going on. Now, the underlying principles around this is effectively that you maintain the 1.5 meter distancing and good hygiene, staying home if unwell, frequently cleaning and disinfecting communal areas, as well as having your COVIDSafe plan in place for workplace and your premises too. Now, with it, what we have seen is that when you go to develop your COVIDSafe plan, and this is one of the things that we're going to walk you through briefly. With this, when we've developed the legal compliance COVIDSafe plans, we've actually taken a quality planning process, and we've actually looked at using one of the quality agencies around the quality improvement plan, the QIP plan, which many of you may be across. Now, with this, we've looked at the legal compliance and policy directives. We've looked at the self-assessment, as well as identifying the areas for improvement as part of this too. Now, one of the things that we have just been asked, and I will just jump to a couple of questions that are being asked around this, is that when will we get these resources emailed across? Or effectively, we will be sending these out after the webinar to all attendees. This includes the copy of the presentation material, along with, and you can use this with your governance committee as well too. Other people have just asked another question that I will mention as well too, just asking what happens if you have taken all necessary precautions and have a statement of compliance, but someone still contracts it. Like we have seen in some of the restaurants in Sydney that had signs up saying that they were COVID safe. Can they take legal action against us? So with it, we'll just mention this to say, look, the measures that we're outlining here is to look at what measures can you put in place to have this, to mitigate and reduce the risk to your agency around this. Some of these things that we see is specific around the restaurants in Sydney, where they may have had signs up, but we really need to look at, well, what are the systems that they've had in place to manage that? How did staff deal with some of those challenges and issues? So we will, and I will also mention that any of the questions that are being asked in today's session, we will come back to these at the end of the session as well too. I am just being flagged if it is relevant to where the slides are, and we are at this point in the presentation. Equally, we will also be circulating copies of all of the questions without people's names to all attendees, and our answers to all of those. So if you do have any questions, by all means, please post them in the chat group as well too. So as part of this, we have taken a very quality management approach to the development of the COVIDSafe plan. We have looked at the compliance, the self-assessment, and then ability to identify areas of improvement for yourselves. And with it, you'll see that effectively all of the COVIDSafe plans, whether you work in education, whether you work in food services, there are generally standards that agencies need to follow. And these followed really the plan, do, check, act process. And you would have seen something like this in your own industry. And the quality cycle around this is really looking at identifying where the strengths are for areas of improvement, and how you do that is through looking at self-assessment and also identifying the areas to improve it and how you can then amend your COVIDSafe plan. And we've actually used this across each of the 3 stages that we have used for other agencies. And the clients I'll show you in a few minutes' time as case examples have already started to do this for a number of months now as well too. As I mentioned, this was just a quality cycle plan document that we've actually taken and referenced QIP as part of their work plan as well too. So in terms of the structure, of what we've looked at here, we've taken the legislation under things like the biosecurity legislation, work health and safety legislation, privacy legislation, health and services legislation, and effectively built up a compliance structure. As part of that, we've then also looked at the next step, which being the policies coming out of the Commonwealth and state government. So you would have seen things like publications, and you can see it on the presentation slide here, the checklist from Safe Work Australia. You may also have seen the pandemic plan for your own state. We've taken it for Victoria as a picture example. There's also the Commonwealth and state guidelines as well too, from the AHPPC, the Australian Health and Practitioners Committee, which informs the Commonwealth on guidelines around COVIDSafe, and we'll actually show you what those specific requirements are. As part of that, the self-assessment tools that you'll have access to is to also provide these checklists as well and allow for you to run the assessments that can also include things like the self-assessment tools that you need to identify the areas for improvement. And really from there, that's where your COVIDSafe plan comes from. So with it, a lot of people will say, right, let's develop a COVIDSafe plan, and they'll jump to try and go, right, what's our area that what we need to do? And that's when it becomes really overwhelming for people. But effectively, what we found that works with agencies, and as I said, with the case examples that I'll show you, is effectively this structure around driving the checklists to start with, and that'll actually give you the information that you need to come up with your own COVIDSafe plan. And you don't have to actually utilize the forms that we have on our system by any means. It's there for yourselves to actually use as a reference guide for yourselves as well. But it is certainly a good reference, as we've seen what actually works for agencies. So with it, effectively, when we jump in, and I'll walk you through the dashboard as well too, effectively we pull the safe work guidelines in. You have the dashboard, so you've met the, I can say you can tick off on the compliance side. The self-assessments will allow you to undertake your own individual audits, and that's important for yourselves to actually undertake specific audits against, well, are you meeting key compliance obligations? From there, you can actually identify the areas for improvement and then update your own COVIDSafe plan based on the industry plans that you have as well too. Now, I mentioned that the Commonwealth had specific directions from the AHPPC around this. And at minimum, based on the Commonwealth directions, there were effectively 14 key requirements that the Commonwealth provided directions on. And these said that employers should have policies, procedures, and technology to support employees to work from home if possible. Employees are supported to work from home where possible to actually do this. They have social distancing is supported, i.e. staggering working hours, and also try to ensure 4 square meters per person and 1.5 meters between people wherever possible as part of this process itself. And with it, there's also the need to discourage carpooling between employees to work from, and also promoting good hand hygiene and washing facilities as well. And there are these other 7 as well too that are brought up on your screen. Now, when we do look at this, one of the challenges that people say is, my goodness, how on earth do we actually manage all of these information as well throughout this whole process? And how can we actually even do things like developing policies, or even looking at providing training to staff to keep them up to date around some of the COVIDSafe requirements that they need to have, or even identify, for example, number 12, early signs and symptoms of COVID-19 and the need to stay home if unwell. How on earth can we actually do this for our staff or volunteers? So with it, what we have set up for agencies around this is giving you the ability to have your COVIDSafe online screening tool. What this allows you to do is effectively jump straight in and allow staff to undertake a very quick screening process. Now, this was just one that's Victorian based, but equally, if you're based in other states, you will have one that's relevant to yourself. And effectively, this allows you to actually do that. And I'll come back to this as well too. Now, the important part for this is that when you set these things up, it's also important to, from a legal compliance point of view, to also identify that employees equally have an obligation to support COVID-19 activities within your workplace. And this is something that Safe Work has also identified as well. So with it, they do have an obligation to isolate, to seek advice, to ensure that they manage their transport around this as well too, that they manage hygiene and cleaning requirements, that they identify and inform the workplace and also take precautions and also undertake reviews themselves. So as part of this, it is actually important that we acknowledge that equally not only directors and officers have obligations, but also employees have obligations as well too. So with it, one of the things that we've looked at is when we look at a COVID-safe plan, and this is when we start to get into the real operational sides of it, and I'll show you the case examples shortly, is that apart from the COVID-safe plan, and I've just used some picture clip art examples. I know they look very medical orientated, but look, we just pull some clip art examples of people. So with it, idea is that once you have your COVID safe plan in place and you've got your checklists effectively that are there, one of the things you need to look at is, well, engaging your volunteers or staff, equally engaging some of your clients as well too into the COVID-19 assessment form, looking at the working from home approval forms or cleaning registers that you might have for your different sites that you have. And so as part of this, to try and put it on one person to actually do would be extremely difficult. And the bigger the company or agency gets, the harder it's actually going to be to actually manage this as well as part of this process. So with it, what we have got is a list of checklist tools, and you can see these on the left-hand side of this particular slide. We have looked at the checklists of what's being used within agencies around this and what has actually worked incredibly well. Now, as part of this, what you can do is run your checklist, and from your checklist, it'll actually import your COVID-safe plan information. Now, let me show you how this actually works for some case examples. Right at the start, I showed you we've got 3 examples, and I'd like to acknowledge Laurie Saville from Rumballara Aboriginal Corporation, Judy Lyne, the Chief Executive Officer of Women's Housing, and also Brad Crosby at Wild Projects as well. Now, with it, when we jump in to your, and you'll see this in your Gemba dashboard that will actually provide you details with, you'll see we've got a list of forms running down the left-hand side and also the pandemic module, which is the disaster module, and that's viewed here. So effectively, we've opened this up so each of you can have access to it for one staff member, and this will allow you to get started with it. If there is additional staff that are using it, obviously there'll be licensing and things like that costs that we'll cover off as well too. So it is something that at least you'll get access to the tools to get started and actually utilizing it within your agency. And that is something that we are opening to all agencies that are joining us today. So with it, effectively your pandemic tool that you have in here allows you to place the COVID safe plans in, and you've got the step 1, step 2, step 3. And if I click on open, you'll see the key requirements for each of the areas to look at. Equally, if you had the COVID safe plan assessment tools, you'll be able to look at this information and be able to register and keep track of specific staff areas as well too, or volunteers in terms of monitoring and registers as well. With it, you've also got access to things like if you're a food bank services for providing food services, then again, what you have is also what we call the pandemic assistance form, which is around food packs and the likes, and you can run those pandemic assistance areas. Equally, if staff are working from home, you've got checklist tools that allow you to run your checklist audits specifically around project items, around staffing checklists of what they're actually doing and what they're actually meaning to deliver to yourselves. Equally, as part of the registers, you can go into the HR area, and you can also update emergency contact information as well as immunization registers and the likes. So it gives you this information at a glance immediately to actually view. Now, with it, how have agencies actually achieved this? Now, when we look at this, this is Rumbalara Aboriginal Corporation. What they've done is effectively, and I'll pick out key things that these agencies have actually looked at as part of this process. With it, they've got their plan in place in the pandemic area. They've got their policies loaded in, and I'll show you what key policies you should be looking at as part of your plan loaded in the Gemba Docs area. They've got their staff training in this area here, where they can actually open it up and have access to specific training for staff as well. Equally, these plans, and I've just got a question around this, do these plans generate for specific states, e.g. legislation? I'm based in Queensland. Yes, they do. So with it, part of the compliance requirements is that they will generate the plan specific to your agency and specific to your specific state area. Also, if your agency operates across multiple states, like we've got a number of community health services that will actually work across different states, then effectively it will also give you key requirements as well for those particular states and across different jurisdictions as well. Equally, they've got their pandemic forms, and in this case, I will mention they've got a daily pandemic form that they expect all staff to complete, all 200 and something or almost 300 plus staff that complete these daily forms as part of the screening. If anyone identifies that they've got a symptoms, and I'll just bring up what one looks like here. So if one person comes in and answers yes to one of these questions, then effectively notifications automatically get sent out to that particular executive manager, and alert gets sent out. And so they're able to monitor their staffing requirements. Equally, they've also got the monitors set up on the HR systems and also risk systems as well around this. So you can start to see that the plan itself is one component, but the additional areas like the policies, the staff training, the pandemic forms, all sit around it, and it will actually inform what you actually need to look at as well too. Now, the policy list that they have on here effectively covers a number of items that they need to see. And with it, what I have just noticed is that there are effectively 8. The policy list is obviously a typo at the top, but effectively what they've got is the policy lists includes the overarching business operations. They've got their mandatory COVID assessment policy, the deed of delegation, and I've given you an example of a privacy and confidentiality policy as well too, that is actually made public to people as well too. So that's why we are able to share it on this screen. But equally, the privacy and confidentiality policy actually covers that under a pandemic, usual privacy and confidentiality legal obligations may be waived in accordance with biosecurity laws. Now, one of the questions that people have asked us is, what happens if someone comes in with COVID-19? Do we obviously have an obligation to actually notify the state health department, or do we have an obligation to hand information that we have across? And under biosecurity laws, then the answer at this stage is yes around that. So with it, again, we've actually had a policy in place that they've actually utilized, sent that out to staff, so people are actually aware of it. Equally, they've also put up a reporting to board and committee policy as well too, and also travel restrictions, work health and safety, work from home policies that they have in place and what the expectations are. And in this case, because they run an aged care service, effective or elders facility, then there are a specific service policy that they have. So these are the key policies we've actually seen that works. And these are the same policies I'll actually show you that actually have been used in the women's housing case study and also the Wild Projects agency as well too. So with it, one of the questions that somebody has just asked is there a cost for the Gemba material? We have opened this up for agencies to use, so you can all have access for this for a license base of one person to actually jump in. Obviously, if there is other staff and services that you are wanting to add in, then there will be a cost around it, and that's obviously scaled depending on the size of your agency and the services that you offer. But quite openly, we are opening this up for agencies to have access to the Gemba dashboard for their agency to start with, and as part of that, that'll give you a single license seat to actually start getting your COVID materials together all in one spot as well too. So with it, what we've seen is that they've affected, when we go back to this slide, when you look at an agency, a larger agency of 200 to 300 plus staff, effectively all of their staff participate in screening for the daily assessment. They're working from home approval forms, workstations, cleaning registers in place, as well as service action requirements, and that effectively will feed back into their COVIDSafe plan. Effectively, as part of this, what then comes out of it is that they're able to generate their own board report as part of your governance reporting. So for yourselves, one of the things that you say is, right, we want to get in, we've put information into here. How do I generate a report straight away for the board? And you can do that, and you can see that I've just got this here by simply clicking on this item here, and immediately what I'm getting, and I'm doing this live for you, is the board report that I can then table of exactly where I'm at any point in time. So if I needed to see exactly how my company's traveling, however small or big it is, you'll be able to see it instantly directly off that, and you can run the report directly from here. Now with it, when we look at women's housing is a different agency as well too as part of this case study. And with this, women's housing provides, obviously, as it says, women's services for women and residential housing as well as transitional housing as well too. So effectively, they are an agency of only up to 60 odd people. The next company that I'll show you is an agency of 2 people plus their board. So with it, this is not just for a big company. Effectively, what we have seen is that it actually carries through, and the COVIDSafe plan can actually be managed for agencies of different sizes. So with it, one of the questions that have just come up that our support desk has flagged with me is effectively, does this information, does the external bodies have access to this information? No, this is based for your agency only. We are in a unique position, as I mentioned right at the start, at the introduction, as being both a legal firm and an IT company as well too. Effectively, using the Gemba dashboard is managed by us and owned by us as well too. So as part of that, you are a client. Any information you put on there, you are a client of our law firm, and all security and information is managed by the security is certainly managed by us, and effectively no other external bodies have access to this information. It is there for your agency to use directly. And that's effectively what each of these agencies have done. So with it, again, following the same process, Women's Housing has put in their plan in place. They've also put in the policies around it, similar to what Rumbalara have done. They've got the staff training. They've got their pandemic forms. Now, their pandemic forms are slightly different because instead of doing the daily forms, effectively what you can see is that they've actually got the weekly forms where they're actually expecting staff to do it on a weekly basis because staff are working remotely from home. If staff do go into one of the Melbourne hotspots, then they are required to report as well too. With it, equally, they've also got their HR registers in place and also risk registers in place here as well too. So with it, and again, the difference is with it, they've also linked this directly to their website. And you can see here that with it, they're managing their website and information. So that way also with Gemba, it can be linked to your website. So again, if you wanted more information and resources and information sent out to your clients or even other consumers that you might have, then again, we have processes in place to manage this. I will be opening up the phone lines shortly around this and finishing this within the next few minutes. So with it, who is involved and responsible? Again, they've all involved all of their staff, including their board members as well too. So if board members wanted to see how they're traveling at any point, then they're able to get access to this information. Equally, they've got cleaning registers in place, so that way, as part of this, they can also run the service. Now, a smaller agency being Wild Projects with it, they're an agency of 2 people. And again, what they've done is follow the same process. And as part of this, again, you can see with it, so that way we can actually see the plan. They've got access to the policies, training, pandemic forms. The difference being here that, again, they've only taken the weekly pandemic forms that they're having staff complete. What they've also got is, because they work with schools, some of the referral forms that they also have for working with schools. And they've given access or giving access directly to the schools that they work with and invited them in to contribute to their COVIDSafe plan as well too. So with it, what we're seeing is this method of actually working through it of the COVIDSafe plan that they've got in place. They've got access to the relevant checklists, as well as then involving their staff, their volunteers, whoever's connected with their agency, and that's feeding back into the COVIDSafe plan itself. And then effectively they're able to provide the reports back to their board as well. So with it, what our recommendations are for agencies is to look at effectively 4 things. It doesn't matter how big or small your agency is, whether you're an agency of only 2 people, right across to an agency of 200-300 plus staff, effectively having the plan, the policy, the pandemic forms or checklists, as well as monitoring what you are doing. The policies that we've seen is that aligning your policies and disaster activities within industry plans, as well as Commonwealth and state guidelines, is common practice of what we've seen that works with agencies. As I've mentioned, we will be opening up the Gemba dashboard and giving yourselves access to your COVIDSafe dashboard so that you can commence working on this. And we've opened this up really for one person within your agency. And as part of this, even if you are a smaller agency, you can get access to this and give you a spot to have all your information in one spot. Obviously, this can be opened up for all staff, volunteers, clients, and other members of your agency. And if this happens, there's obviously a monthly associated cost with it. But quite openly, that is, we are opening this up to allow you to have agency of 1 representative for your agency to have access to this and give you the space to able to do this work as well too. It is a public health challenge that we are seeing, and give you the space to be able to do this. Your policies, we've covered off the specific items, but also give you a bit more information of what your policies should include as part of this process, and certainly with this, specific requirements that your agencies need to follow as well too. We will open the lines up for any questions. While we are doing that, I will just say thank you for your time today. If you do have any questions around this after today's session, you can always email us at support@gemba360.com, which is our support desk inquiry line, or contact us on 1300 360 360.